Is America the most free country in the world? What's so great about America? Which countries have the most freedom? Which countries have the best human rights? And why are Singaporeans so unhappy? This article doesn't represent my writing style, specifically collecting and presenting information. The book is a far better representation of my writing style, as being information-packed and contains almost no swearing, except in embedded or linked videos. Responders from Quora, Reddit, and other forums are not required to read the whole book before answering questions. If you do read the book, I recommend you skip over war in Israel because people just can't handle talking about the Israel-Palestine conflict. A note to leftists. Leftists, people who disagree with you are not lacking in compassion. People might not disagree with you only because the Koch brothers, Ayn Rand, Fox, corporations, or whatever. Maybe, just maybe, other people have different ways of solving the same problems you are trying to solve. The Heartless Tin Man. This is a very common form of ad hominem in political discussions. Your opposition doesn't agree with you because he just doesn't care. Why do you hate the poor? What do you think of the children? You heard them all. So just what happened? So just when someone misrepresents a claim, we say you're arguing against a straw man. When this happens, we should say you're arguing against a tin man, because you're arguing against a completely fictional opponent that doesn't have a heart. Like the straw man fallacy, if you have to argue against the caricature of your opponent, you really have no argument to make at all. I also ask that you watch the following two videos. I'm Worried About Humanity's Future by Mr. Who's the Boss, and Why the Right and Left Hate Each Other by What If Alt-Hist. Social psychologist Jonathan Haidt has studied how well conservatives, moderates, and leftists can predict each other's values. What was found from a study that conservatives and moderates did a good job at predicting the values of leftists, while leftists did a bad job at predicting the values of conservatives and moderates. Addressing leftists, I don't think myself as a callous man. I support charity. I'm anti-war. Accepting in queers, who says equals. Support animal welfare. I oppose circumcising children. I support youth rights. I even oppose spanking. Do these positions seem like positions held by a callous person to you? If I have a different idea from you, does it mean that I don't care if children are starving? Or does it mean that I simply have different ideas on how to solve the same problems? How would you feel if I accused you of loving Joseph Stalin because you agree with him that the government should build roads? Or that you love Mao Zedong or Pol Pot because you want to fix inequality? Seriously, ask yourself that before accusing other people of being a heartless tin man. So put down your echo chamber made straw man and prepare to have your worldview challenged.
Number 11. Purposely misunderstanding people is okay. One of the things that drives me absolutely insane in debates is when I put a major point across and then the other person just nitpicks a bunch of minor details without touching the core point of the argument. It's depressing to see great men often get torn down for minor things they would have scarcely thought about and not considered for their greatest achievements. Sigmund Freud is mocked for penis envy and the Oedipal complex rather than figuring out the underlying basis of modern psychology and the unconscious. An alternate figure, whether you love him or hate him, is Jordan Peterson, who is criticized for his comments on transgender people, while the entire pseudo-religion he's constructed based off Jungian psychology is completely ignored. This is since our minds are inherently irrational, and if we dislike someone, since it's against our self-interest somehow, we look for reasons no matter how petty to do so, and since we don't want to come to terms with their core beliefs, we purposely misunderstand by nitpicking and trying to cut things in a lot of little ways. This may sound like a minor thing, but it's actually a massive factor in tearing down successful interactions in people. The way you prevent big things from happening is by heckling them. Look at countries like Italy or Spain, which have ground their economies to standstills with lots of regulations. If you're a teacher, the best way to discourage a student from being brilliant is by cutting them down by grading them too harshly for spelling mistakes. Society is built on cooperation, and we can either structure it to be a negative force for criticism and belittlement, or a positive one for encouragement and positive growth. Negative examples of this include stranger danger, systems in which children were encouraged to view all strangers as dangerous, which resulted in a generation of isolated, unsocial, and lonely people. Alternatively, academia's immense insistence upon exactness, which cuts down genius and works of broad scope. We need to structure society with hope rather than fear, growth rather than littleness in mind. Number 8. Information can be harmful. Nietzsche once said you can judge a man by how much truth he can handle. The truth is that the truth is the ultimate arbiter of existence. Having an understanding of how things work is the most important part of doing anything. You can't be hurt by knowing information, since knowing the truth is just knowing what you'd already have to deal with anyway. Knowing that a hurricane is coming your way might lead to short-term stress, but it will allow you to prepare for said hurricane. However, across history and the world today, you see that regimes and ideologies try to shut off the supply of information, saying it will hurt the public. The truth, however, is just that information hurts these regimes and their power. I remember an amusing anecdote of how Catholic authorities in France were burning Bibles during the Reformation, for fear that people would, upon reading them, become Protestant, to which my reaction is, wouldn't you realize you're the one at fault upon realizing that the appropriate reaction to reading your source material is that you're wrong? When someone tries to hide information, it means that they know they're on the losing side of the argument but want to keep power. This is true between Tokugawa shogunate Japan, Stalinist Russia, or Inquisition Spain. You can always tell who the bad guys are based off those who vilify the truth and tell you should support party thinking above it. There's a difference between this and the addiction models that come with modern social media, however. When an already beautiful model with Photoshop and filters makes women feel insecure, they're not getting information, they're getting propaganda of something that isn't real. Similarly, social media apps are designed to be inherently addictive. As an inverse to information, propaganda is inherently harmful. The low degree of trust in societies in the modern world is likely a result of the massive propaganda campaigns of the world wars that all out lied to their populations. Similarly, although I think they're evil, I do understand why authorities want to keep their stories about the world and filter out repeating information, because said stories are how societies work, and by degrading the common myths of societies, you degrade cooperation. However, I think what people should do is edit their stories so that they can fit into new information. And that's difficult, but I think it has to be done. And also, to be truthful, I do draw an exception judgment attached. Number 2. Intentions equals results. Okay, so self-interest isn't everything, but it's very easy to do the opposite and act like goodwill is the only important thing. This in turn can create incredible problems when scaled. Giving people who want to do good too much power is how millions of people have died across history. This always becomes a problem when too many people with power agree that they're right and think that opposing their intentions makes other people inherently evil. Across history, religious fanatics have done this a lot, and today the left is by far the group that's most guilty of it. Take the social justice insistence upon defund the police. This comes from a good-meaning leftist outrage that stems from police forces often actually being corrupt and mistreating black ghetto communities often like colonies. In real terms, however, the actual amount of unarmed black men who are shot by the police is statistically very small. The real effects of lessening police influence in black communities and replacing them with social workers who have an extremely bad track record in improving said communities is a skyrocketing rate of black gun deaths, since the vast majority of black people who are killed are by other black people. Statistically, police presence markedly lowers the murder rate, and so defund the police has actually ended up killing far more black people than it saved. We've seen a 1/3 rise in homicide rates since 2020. The cardinal sin of left-wing philosophy is that it believes that people with good intentions are more important on a macro scale than incentive structures. Left-wingers believe that having the right opinions that brings them to utopia makes them good people, rather than actually moral actions, which is why communists have always been willing to kill millions to reach their utopias. For example, left-wingers often think right-wingers are evil since they think the right-wingers are willfully against progress, while the right-wingers often think left-wing policies just don't work. This obsession with intentions has often forced left-wingers into echo chambers, which dislodge them from reality, which has resulted in legitimately evil consequences, caused by people who wish the best. Communism in a 60-year period killed almost as many people as every other religion and ideology combined across the whole of human history. Something really important is that if you sacralize a social group for having good intentions, it will actively attract the most evil and unscrupulous people who will want to use the goodwill as a cover for bad actions. This is why the Catholic Church attracted pedophiles, communist movements the worst tyrants of all time, or religious fanatics have often blatantly broke the tenets of the religions they hold so dear. A great example of incentive structures working in weird ways is that the British Raja in India wanted to lower the snake population, and so gave cash prizes to people who would bring them dead snakes. This in turn resulted in people breeding snakes and killing them in order to bring them to authorities for a cash prize. The British realized this and got rid of the cash prize, which resulted in the snake breeders releasing their snakes into the streets, which just made the problem worse. The key point to consider here is that our brains were designed to deal with small hunter-gatherer communities. People's brains tend to be on a spectrum between logic, thing-based, and people-feeling-based. The people-feeling part of our brain tends to be better at in-person, small-scale communications. If your cousin makes a mistake but his intentions are good, you should forgive him. However, once you scale to millions of people, you need to view things logically and abstractly. The problem is that when people try to make political decisions to show their morality to become popular inside their own moral structure, whether in Soviet Russia, medieval China, or 16th century Spain, this is my problem with isms like globalism, capitalism, communism, etc., since when you start treating political positions like religions that demand loyalty, rather than tools to help your nation prosper, you're going to run into this problem eventually. An attachment to this is the cult of authenticity, in which lots of people today basically believe that the way to be true and moral is to be as purely authentic to yourself as possible. And in a lot of ways that's true, or if you try to copy someone else too much, or act in a way that doesn't make you happy, it's going to make you fundamentally miserable, and you're going to fail at playing games that other people are naturally more attuned to. At the same time, you need to learn from other people and balance out your own weaknesses. So if you're a nerd, learn to be more charismatic and presentable. If you're a jock, learn to be more wise. Or if you're a goth, don't wear your black makeup into the workforce. Cannibalism's authentic to New Guinean tribes, and I don't think that fundamentally makes it okay. But at the same time, I don't think countries should throw away their individuality and enter into the world's McDonaldization.
Today's culture wars partially stem from the different definitions of freedom. There are seemingly four most common definitions of freedom. My commentary on this will be based on the academic agents. Why Rousseau is the problem, the Sargon of Akkad. Definition 1. Self-actualization. This is the ancient, aristocratic, and often right-wing and social conservative definition of freedom. You're your freest when you're your best self. For example, if you studied hard, worked out at the gym, watched a diet, cultivated good and virtuous habits. This is you achieving self-actualization. This definition of freedom can be traced back to Aristotle and Friedrich Nietzsche. Many social conservatives argue that vices, such as pornography, prostitution, gambling, and drugs, prevent self-actualization. Definition 2. Freedom from coercion. This is the classical liberal definition of freedom. You're free to walk down the street, but not to make anyone else carry you down the street. Your freedom to throw punches ends where someone else's face begins. This definition of freedom can be traced back to John Locke, Herbert Spencer, and F.A. Hayek. This definition seems to be more popular among parts of the United States of America, and maybe even the Czech Republic and Estonia. Definition 3. Convenience. Lack of personal responsibility and or lack of boundaries. I'm free to do whatever I want without boundaries. I'm free to make you carry me down the street. In the words of YouTube user Mad Robot. Freedom is being unconstrained by responsibility, not having to worry about food, housing, education, transportation, healthcare, etc., not having to suffer the consequences of their own actions, playing the victim and blaming society or others for their own inadequacies. This definition of freedom is promoted by Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Karl Marx, and Jacques Derrida. This is the leftist definition of freedom. Definition 4. Group self-determination. My tribe or my nation is free to govern itself. This is probably the definition of freedom outside the Western world. I do support localism, local autonomy, self-governance, and decentralized government, but only if the rights of the individual are respected. For example, should a group of people be free to beat their children for no reason at all for minor offenses, or even worse, perform animal and human sacrifices? For a less family-friendly example, should people be allowed to commit marital rape, mutilate the genitals of tribes members for being a member of the tribe, or torture animals, or kill endangered or threatened animals when doing so is not absolutely necessary just because it's part of their culture? Real examples of this would be the Plymouth colony, which was a totalitarian theocracy, and even better examples would be Afghanistan, North Pakistan, rural Yemen, and parts of Northeast Africa, of totalitarian fundamentalism, genital mutilation, and honor killings. Genital mutilation. Comparing freedom in American states. Don't like county governments? Alaska, Connecticut, and Rhode Island. Want to drive before you're 17? South Dakota, North Dakota, Montana, and Idaho. Many other states allow 16-year-olds to drive. Want to use cannabis? Alaska, Arizona, California, Colorado, Connecticut, Illinois, Maine, Massachusetts, Michigan, Montana, Nevada, New Jersey, New Mexico, New York, Oregon, Vermont, Virginia, and Washington. Don't want to pay sales taxes? Delaware, Montana, New Hampshire, and Oregon. Don't want to pay income taxes? Florida, Nevada, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Washington, and Wyoming. New Hampshire only has income taxes on dividends and interest. Want legal prostitution and brothels? Nevada. Convicted felon and want to vote? There's dozens of states where you can do that. Want to own and carry knives? Alaska, Arizona, Kansas, Montana, New Hampshire, Oklahoma, Tennessee, and Wisconsin. Want a license to carry a gun? Idaho. Want to own guns? Alaska. Want to have sex with a 16-year-old? The South and New England. Want to be perfectly alone? Smoke weed? Have guns? And pay few taxes with your 16-year-old girlfriend? But don't mind the frigid Arctic tundra? Alaska. Alaska. Libertarianism has already been tried. Most information comes from Wikipedia. Freedom in Europe. And what's great about Europe. Want to drink? Think at or even before you're 18? No problem most of Europe. Want to buy/sell sex? Plenty of countries where it's legal. Want no corporate income tax? Latvia, United Kingdom Channel Islands of Isle of Man, Guernsey, Jersey, and Sark. Dislike government school uniforms, speed limits on highways, or restrictions on advertising, eating, drinking, vaping, or smoking? Germany. Want to drive a moped before you're 18? You could be 14 and drive a moped in Estonia, Switzerland, Poland, and Latvia. 15 in the Czech Republic, Lithuania, Austria, Finland, Denmark, Spain, and Germany, and 16 in the United Kingdom, Netherlands, Bulgaria, Luxembourg, Belgium, Norway, and Sweden. Want to drive before you're 18? Kosovo, Isle of Man, Guernsey, Jersey, Iceland, and the United Kingdom, with runner-ups being France, Estonia, Slovenia, Latvia, Luxembourg, Gibraltar, Greece, Ireland, Italy, the Netherlands, Germany, and Slovakia. Want to be an adult at 16? Scotland. Though you'll need to wait 2 more years to get a gun license. Prefer a flat tax? Bosnia and Herzegovina, Bulgaria, Estonia, Georgia, Guernsey, Hungary, Jersey, Moldova, and Romania. Want to use medical marijuana? Croatia, Cyprus, Czech Republic, Denmark, Finland, Germany, Greece, Ireland, Italy, Lithuania, Luxembourg, Malta, the Netherlands, North Macedonia, Norway, Poland, Portugal, San Marino, and Switzerland. And want to use cannabis without being prosecuted like a criminal? Austria, Belgium, the Czech Republic, Estonia, Finland, Italy, Luxembourg, Malta, Poland, Slovenia, and Switzerland. Want recreational cannabis? Georgia and the Netherlands. Want to home educate? Ireland. Want firecrackers? The Czech Republic's the best country for that. Want to own and use suppressors? Norway, France, and Finland. Want unlimited capacity firearms magazines? Poland and Serbia. Want black powder guns with no license? France, Poland, and Croatia are the best countries to be in, allowing both newly manufactured black powder guns and revolvers. Want air guns with no license? Bulgaria, the United Kingdom, and the Netherlands are the best countries to be in. Want modern long guns with no permit? Andorra, Austria, Greenland, Monaco, and Switzerland. Want a shall-issue firearms license? 20 countries have you covered. 15 of them have shall-issue licenses for semi-automatic centerfire rifles. 16 of them have shall-issue licenses for handguns. And 14 of them have shall-issue licenses for both. Want to conceal carry? Czech Republic, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland are all shall-issue jurisdictions and conceal carry firearms. Want the most personal freedom, business freedom, and low taxes all combined? Try Estonia, Liechtenstein, Switzerland, the Czech Republic, Georgia, Poland, Monaco, and Andorra, almost exactly in that order. People of Scotland and Ireland, objectively speaking, your nation is far from the freest as in Europe or the West. Putting it in polite terms, you have a long way to go. Freedom in America. Is America the freest country in the world? Yes and no. The long answer is that, while America is not the best at any single aspect of freedom, it's good as an aggregate, and thanks to its decentralization, gives the individual more choices than any single country in the world. In short, America gives the individual more choices than any single country can. America may not have the most personal freedoms. Even if drugs are legalized or decriminalized in your state, the federal government may still come after you. Prostitution is only legal in several counties in Nevada. Gambling is banned in some states and restricted in others. Economic freedom. There's countries, territories with less regulatory capture or have simpler regulations, such as Singapore, Switzerland, and the Cayman Islands, Hong Kong in the past, etc. Business and occupational licensing vary from state to state. Lowest taxes. Anguilla, British Virgin Islands, Cayman Islands, Pitcairn Islands, and St. Kitts and Nevis all lack either corporate or income taxes. The U.S. used to have some of the highest corporate tax rates in the world, and the highest in the first world before 2017, and the complicated federal tax code alone creates a situation where mom and pop shops are paying more than a third of their income to the federal government, and while multi-billion-dollar corporations pay virtually nothing because the latter can afford lawyers and accountants to find tax exemptions. Educational freedom. Private schools and home education is legal in every state. However, this varies wildly depending on the state. Freedom to keep and bear arms. Yemen, and to a less degree Pakistan, are better on this. what America does have is that it's pretty good freedom as an aggregate. From the Bill of Rights alone, you have the right to freedom of religion, speech / press, peaceful assembly, due process, a speedy public trial by an impartial jury, confront and or compel witnesses, assistance of counsel, right to an attorney, no excessive fines or cruel or unusual punishments, self-defense and to keep and bear arms. Even in the most restrictive jurisdictions, such as New York City, firearms licenses are still shall issue, and after NYSRPA v. Bruin, licenses to carry firearms are shall issue. In Europe, while many countries have shall issue licenses to own firearms, only 5 countries have shall issue licenses to carry firearms, being the Czech Republic, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland. And though Lithuania doesn't allow for rounds to be chambered except for revolvers, and in Poland, the police can restrict you from carrying. More freedom of speech and less censorship than much of Europe, Canada, or Australia, the last of which is infamous for its internet censorship, specifically of hate speech laws. No warrantless or unreasonable searches or seizures, at least officially. You can also own a television without a license. America is the country in which if you don't like living in Yuktivik / Barrow, Alaska, you have the option of moving to Key West, Florida, and you're still in the political mainland. You can also drive or ride from Key West, Florida, to Western Washington before needing a plane or a boat to reach Alaska, or drive to Canada, and then drive to Prudhoe Bay. Go into the interactive map, freedom in the 50 states, and you'll see just how much choice you have. Even in expensive cities, you still have the option to live in a van or recreational vehicle. Even when it comes to dealing with the legal system, Clive Stafford Smith, an activist who himself is British in the video, is the death penalty immoral? He said that he'd rather deal with Arizona's or even Mississippi's legal system than the British legal system. He says that Britain's system is worse than Arizona's system in several ways, being more judges went to posh private schools, which I guess he believes increases the disconnect between the rich and poor. Defense attorneys, solicitors do not get police files. Defense is not allowed to talk to witnesses, or at least certain witnesses, and jurors can go to prison if they say anything about their experience. One advantage that America has over Europe is having far less language barriers. Let's just say that you're interested in Estonia, Liechtenstein, Switzerland, the Czech Republic, Georgia, Poland, Monaco, and Andorra. For those 8 countries, you'll need to know German, Catalan, Polish, Czech, Estonian, and Georgian for a total of 7 languages. That'll take you across 5 language families. Estonian and Georgian will be especially the hardest languages to learn, and I think that Georgian has almost nothing in common with Germanic or Romance languages, and definitely doesn't use Latin script. In many countries, in order to enjoy certain freedoms, you must speak their language. For example, in the Czech Republic, after 2011, you had to take your test and practical exam for a gun license in Czech, and you cannot use an interpreter / translator, and even at that, licenses are not shall issue for all foreigners. This is very likely the case for other countries. it may also be a similar case to say, hey, start a business. Though depending on the country, you may hire an accountant or lawyer to do it for you. Compare that to the US. In the US, the only language you really need to know is English. It makes things easier, whether you're dealing with an emergency, going about your daily life, paying taxes, starting a business, or getting a gun license. And racism. Just watch Hotch Serpent ZA's Americans Whine Too Bloody Much, and Larry Elder, her interview, her book, 10 Things You Can't Say in America. The moment Larry Elder, he'll change Dave Rubin's mind forever, and diversity makes us better. From 2015-2017, 158 million, or 21%, of people surveyed in a survey, they said that they'd rather move to America. The runners up are Canada and Germany at 45 million, or 6%. The belief that small town and rural Americans are racist is a misconception. And what's true is that they have a stronger in-group preference than urban Americans. They prefer their tight-knit community, and when you enter their domain, you must pass a test, at least spend time with them before you're welcomed into the tribe, unlike big city people who are quicker to accept outsiders. This applies to rural people pretty much worldwide. Turn off CNN or whatever's on TV, close out any mainstream media or social media pages, close your MacBook, put your iPad away, put your iPhone in your pocket, get out of your coffee shop or university/college campus, maybe get into your Toyota Prius, Subaru or Volvo, experience the real world, not the media world. Or as the meme says, go touch some grass. A piece of advice I have if you're immigrating to America is to get a job in the trades. Examples of trade jobs would be a plumber, electrician, mechanic, welder, construction worker, and industrial plant worker. I like to compare America's empty quarter to Southeast Asia, based on Explaining America's 9 Nations, Part 2, and Explaining Southeast Asian Civilizations. I know that it's superficial, but I'll do it anyway. In many ways, the empty quarter and Southeast Asia are polar opposites, with the EQ being sparsely populated, mostly temperate or desert, mostly landlocked, and is culturally probably the most individualistic place in the world. While SEA is densely populated, tropical, and of the most collectivist societies in the world. But what I see that's similar between the EQ and SEA is that they, by and large, avoid some of the very worst aspects of their parent societies. And in SEA, they never had a caste system as strong as India, never had Islamic fanaticism as bad as the Middle East. And Vietnam never had a tyrant as bad as China. And the EQ, despite being extremely rural, is less socially conservative than the American South, never doing stuff like lynching blacks or paddling children as badly as the South. Colorado leftism is more about smoking marijuana and protecting the environment than fundamentally changing Western civilization. And from what I've read, Colorado is politically a pretty moderate place. I'd also like to compare the American South to the West Coast against the West Coast and Northeast megalopolis as if they were India, Islam, and China. I'd compare the West Coast and Northeast megalopolis to China, being obsessed with education, urbanized, and is ruled by a big government, where the American South would be Islam and India, being insanely socially conservative, the South is probably the most socially conservative place in Western civilization and backwards, and by and large, people don't trust the government, preferring to work with their families and local communities. Like I said, these comparisons are superficial. The conflict of values. Many Europeans think themselves as being more civilized than Americans. I don't entirely disagree with them, considering how European children and teens tend to be treated better than their American counterparts. But this is, nonetheless, very one-sided. Whenever Europeans, North Americans, Canadians, and Australians, and so on say that North Europeans, say that they're more civilized than Americans, what they really mean is that they value harm more than Americans. Western Europeans, including Scandinavians, on average, overall value harm significantly more than Americans, as do progressives, which is why so many leftists like Europe. This is in contrast to libertarians who value liberty, and TPUSA and Hank Hill moderate conservatives who are balanced. This is based on the book The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt. I've seen several commenters who claim that Americans value harm more than Europeans, which I disagree with. To prove this, let me ask Scandinavians and Western Europeans if they'd support all the following: adopting weapon laws similar to the Czech Republic, shall issue licenses to possess assault weapons and to conceal carry pistols, possessing police batons, pepper spray, and knives are completely unregulated for adults, abolishing hate speech laws, abolishing Holocaust denial laws. If they say no to any of the above, I think that's evidence that Western Europeans hence value harm more than Americans. For more evidence, go to YouTube Comment Finder, put in a URL from the following videos and search Europe. Gun gripes number 103, the sheep mentality, UK to ban kitchen knives, sacrificing freedom for security, elderly NYC store clerk arrested for defending himself against abusive criminal, FKNYC, self-defense laws, minimal force to protect criminals. Also, in Germany in 2012, there were attempts to ban circumcision, which were unsuccessful. This doesn't give me confidence that Europeans have the willpower to stand up for values and principles. Look at those comments. Think about them for a minute. And that's my point. Contrary to what the media tells you, stand your ground laws are not a license to kill. All they mean is that you can defend yourself without being sent to prison. Anyways, I don't think that Europeans, Canadians, and Australians value harm more than Americans because they're smarter or more civilized, but because of a combination of the world wars, the Holocaust, urbanization, and the rise of the technocratic state. For Europe, a combination of world wars and the Holocaust caused a PTSD and knee-jerk reaction in which people went out of their way to be the opposite of the Nazis, which led to the belief that all harm is bad. Nazism was so evil and horrifying that much of Europe afterwards basically decided to go for the exact opposite. While the Nazis were nationalistic, hyper-masculine, racist, and militaristic, modern Europe is transnational, generally dislikes aggression, is multicultural, and pacifist. Yes. Future of Ideology, by Waterfall Hist. This is further talked about in a final 8 taboos about history and society. Urbanization led to a rise of progressive values. It's simply a matter of fact that, in the West, left-wing ideas are strongest in cities. Academia and the media are also concentrated in cities, which is part of the reason why they're so left-wing and why they want to reform society so much. America's population is more rural and small-town than Europe, which I think is the reason why America is somewhat more conservative than Europe. Likewise, Canada and Australia Most of the population is concentrated in just several big cities, which is why they're so left-wing. The rise of the technocratic state also goes with this. Convenience, hence, and safety versus freedom. Convenience and safety versus freedom. 3 things you need to know about are institutionalization, institutional syndrome, learned helplessness, and Stockholm syndrome. Your ancestors ran around dealing with blazing heat, pouring rain, blizzards, regularly getting bug bites, dealing with disease, and fighting off all kinds of predators such as wolves, lions, tigers, and bears, name a few. What went wrong? So here's how you became weak. Whether you're an Asian who fears chaos, or Western European, Canadian, or Australian that feels death and pain. You were probably born in a regulated hospital. You probably went to a controlled daycare with controlled activities. You're sent to school. In school, just like prison, there's an authoritarian structure, dress code, emphasis on silence and order, negative reinforcement, made to walk in lines, lose individual autonomy, abridged freedoms, no input in decision making, and have set times enforced for walking, eating, and so on. After graduating grade school, you're slotted into college based on a test score where you're fed a created ideology. And then you work a job, doing only what your boss tells you to do and working at appointed hours. It's completely in the interest of a government to pacify its population. Freedom's a little bit inconvenient, uncomfortable, even dangerous. But I think it's worth foregoing a little convenience, comfort, and safety of happiness. Read the essay, Industrial Society and Its Future, which was written by a child prodigy and Harvard professor. One of the points made in the essay is how difficult it is to have agency over your life and how it makes you miserable. Part of my reasoning for being a libertarian is to give as much agency as possible to the individual, as that I believe it's up to the individual to find meaning and happiness.
The thing that always confused me in my personal life was why people were so scared of social pressure. I'm a person who's naturally wired to not care a lot about what others think about me, and I always found it confusing why in high school, for instance, trying hard at things and being earnest was looked down upon, while it actually produced amazing results. Similarly, why people are so scared to try things that might fail, even if it costs them nothing but wasted effort and emotion, like starting a business or side hustle, romantically reaching out to a potential partner, or starting a new hobby. This is because our minds are designed for hunter-gatherer communities of a couple dozen or so rather than millions of people. The people that survived were those that got along among a small group of people that they'd have to share their lives with. Someone like me would probably have been murdered by the rest of the tribe for showing why some tribal superstition was, from my perspective, clearly false. Most humans are naturally conditioned to get along and undershoot their potential, since without the size of social hierarchies as they are now, there is simply less to gain from extreme risk-taking. From a genetic basis, the people who make up our current political, CEO, and leadership classes in general are insane genetic outliers that are wired to expend massive amounts of effort to succeed by basically gambling being disliked with massive success. In a hunter-gatherer community, the most success you could have is making a big bison kill. At the same time, not getting along with the group of people you would live with for your entire life would be very dangerous.
Are we in a zoo? So far the things I've talked about are the things that most of you could probably figure out on your own on an intuitive basis. Sure, technology in our society's culture creates problems with data. However, the thing I'm going to propose next is something a lot of you probably can't even imagine, and will unsettle a lot of your worldviews. This is that urban humans today have lots of behaviors reminiscent of zoo animals. Zoo animals experience tremendous anxiety, pace around, have weird tics like licking off their fur, overeating, have to use drugs, masturbate obsessively, be unable to have children, grinding your teeth, over-grooming, and depression, all of which are normal in modern industrial societies. The biggest primatologist of the last century, Desmond Morris, has written several fascinating books that talk about this. I mean, in all reality, how different is modern industrial civilization in all actuality from a zoo? Many of us live in highly controlled boxes that we barely leave, especially with the internet. Our society protects us from any real threats. We do monotonous tasks to get our daily supply of food. We're surrounded by strangers at all times, and we really don't have control of our lives. Rather, large transnational forces do and the like. I like to quote, "What you do to others will happen to you." And humanity, after centuries or millennia of caging its animals, has put itself into a cage. The thing to consider is that we aren't that different at all from those animals. We evolved to live in the wild, and religious tribes in the wilderness struggling together against the wild. Once you remove those conditions, we've stopped doing the thing we evolved to do in the first place. In the same way that those lions and elephants should not be stuck in cages and should be out in their packs in the wild living their lives, even if they're much safer in the zoos, so should we. Something that modern civilization ignores is an important comparison that ought to be made between zoo animals and modern industrial societies is the lack of agency. Although I don't condone terrorism, I think Ted Kaczynski makes an interesting point on how difficult it is to have power over your life in modern society. How we feel like useless cogs in the machine, where we're surrounded by uncaring strangers and the machine of industrial bureaucratic civilization. We work at large corporations for a boss that doesn't give a fuck about us, who tells us when and how to work, where the only thing expected of us is obedience in our time. We often live in big cities that make us feel like ants. And when we get old, we get shoved into retirement homes while we were raised by strangers in daycares and taught at schools to make us useful little cogs. You need to compare this to the pre-modern world, where almost everyone you dealt with was someone you knew from childhood. And your only authority in government was the local lord and priest. The greatest scholar of depression today, Johann Hari, has from studies found the conditions of powerlessness kind of cause our spirits to die, for us to lose creativity, initiative, and the like, and I'm guessing sexual virility. An example he gives is in his book is that after 12 hours of shaking paint as your job, the only thing you want to do is die on the couch in front of your TV, and you don't have the energy to build your community, create, and the like. Things like this deaden us and suppress our drive to breed in the same way the monotony of the zoo means animals struggle to breed there.
An interesting example.
Singapore is ranked lower than impoverished and or war-torn countries such as Liberia, Haiti, Syria, Central African Republic, Iraq, Afghanistan, and even war-torn and starving Yemen, though I'd rather live in Singapore than any of the aforementioned countries. Even Latin Americans are more positive than Singaporeans, the latter of whom are the least positive worldwide. I don't know about you, but Singapore is like a freedom, not to mention the astronomical cost of living and being a crowded place to be, doesn't make it desirable for me. I'd also want my children to have actual childhoods that are happy instead of being miserable automatons. As for Cuban healthcare, don't make me laugh. The reason why Asians are so accepting of authoritarianism and even totalitarianism is because of the Mongol Empire, which was so cruel that people are willing to give up almost anything to not experience it again.
There's a ton of laws still on the books designed to shape society for
the greater good.
Public dress codes, free speech zones, the FCC's censorship of TV and radio, the Washington wives, prostitution laws, restrictions on homeschooling and private schools, the war on drugs, eminent domain, civil asset forfeiture, even the stuff most people think is not that bad, like occupational licensing, zoning restrictions, or anti-smoking laws, are based in the same kind of utilitarian thinking. At the core of all of this is the idea that individual people's interests and values just aren't that important. And really, what we should learn from this is that as positive and well-meaning as the whole thing seems, more often than not, the greater good isn't a reflection of what's best for everyone, but of what's best for the people in power.
You'll find that we run a very tight ship here.
And as long as people don't think about it too much or fight back, it all kind of works out. But it breaks down pretty quickly when someone challenges the status quo. No society is going to be perfect, and of course, different communities will probably always set some rules on what people can do, but perhaps we should at least start with the presumption that everyone should be free to live their lives however they want, instead of forcing society to fit our own personal preferences. A single greater good for everyone might be a myth, but the good for individual people that comes from tolerating a diverse society where everyone can pursue their own interest without fear of fines, jail, or being killed, that is it.
In the end, America is not the freest country in the world by any single measure. America is a decently free country by most measures and is one of the freest, all things considered. No single country can give the individual as much choice as America. Only the entire area of Europe is a real rival, and Europe has its own set of problems. America is far, far, far from the worst country in the world. America is not some borderline dog-eat-dog dystopia that some people think it is. Americans can learn better attitudes towards child rearing and sex from the Dutch, while Europeans can take a hint about self-defense and psychological strength from Americans. America is a highly flawed country, but in total is never worse than any second or third world country. Conservative Americans tend to be not interested in other cultures except for looking at them with contempt. Leftist Americans hence are interested in Europe, but only superficially and selectively, as I've written. I'm sorely disappointed at political discourse right now. Much of what I've written can easily be found if you just put the slightest amount of effort from resources as mainstream as Wikipedia, especially on personal freedoms. Believe it or not, even the very best military and intelligence organizations utilize open source intelligence. While the focus most writers and the general public place on bold, high-risk operations, the majority of useful intelligence has been and probably will continue to be gathered through open sources. This means newspapers, blogs, media, and anything else that anybody can have a gander at. To quote General Anthony Charles Zinni, United States Marine Corps, retired, former Commander-in-Chief of U.S. Central Command, 80% of what I need to know at Sinsen and I got from open sources rather than classified reporting, and within the remaining 20%, if I know what to look for, I found another 16%. At the end of it all, classified intelligence provided me, at best, with 4% of my command knowledge. An example of just how simple intelligence gathering can be, after writing The Hunt for Red October, Tom Clancy was visited by government agents who were very put out that the book had discussed highly classified aspects of modern submarine technology. Clancy was able to get off the hook by showing that he had gotten all his information by going to the local library, reading up on unclassified information there, and just do a little extrapolating. All that top secret information was essentially lying around in the open for anyone who cared to invest in nothing more than a library card and a few hours of studying. Boring but practical, real life TV tropes. There's no such thing as a perfect country. Every country in the first world has its advantages and disadvantages. You just have to prioritize which values you care about the most. I also want to talk about why libertarianism isn't more popular. Libertarianism fails to motivate people the way religious fanaticism does, and pushes against every single power interest there is, with the possible exception of merchants who can gain success in a market economy. In general, libertarianism gets opposition from government officials and bureaucrats who will either be unemployed, or if they're employed, have little power to change society as they see fit, and or lose aid, subsidies from other stronger, richer governments. Academics, teachers, and college/university professors, because as it won't give them cushy unionized white-collar careers, nor power to make sweeping changes on society as they see fit. Priest class has some religious leaders who want to tell people what to do. The warrior class has military, paramilitary, law enforcement, and intelligence organizations who may feel handicapped by libertarianism. Big businesses who want government bailouts, subsidies, and regulatory capture. Lazy people who want welfare. And people who feel helpless, especially in a structured society, which they fear they'll struggle without assistance from the state. Please support the Substack blogs America vs. Europe and the World and Arguments Against Leftism. Here's my social media link tree, which I ask that you keep archive. You keep the link and archive my content. And please